Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. From the King Edward Hotel in downtown Toronto, welcome to the Empire Club of Canada. For those of you joining us through either webcast or podcast, welcome to the meeting. Today we present Mike Rencheck, President and Chief Executive Officer of Bruce Power, for today's topic, Nuclear Power, Securing Our Future. It's my pleasure today to welcome Mike Rencheck to the Empire Club of Canada. In doing research about Mike, I learned that Mike won an award as the CEO who gets it, which must be about the best thing you could say about someone as a professional. I'm sure everyone here would welcome an award like this from their peers. He or she gets it. Any day of the week, that would be a great compliment to achieve. For Mike, this award came from the National Safety Council, and it was in recognition of his commitment to worker health and safety, which makes a lot of sense. A leader who puts the team first, who puts safety first, these are certainly the qualities of a CEO who gets it, which is why it is so great to have Mike here today, because there is so much to understand about nuclear power, about its place in the energy supply mix in this province today and going forward. Of course, as a province, we have a long, proud history of nuclear energy, and the Empire Club has a long, proud history of pulling together engaged citizens to talk about nuclear's place in the province. The discussion of nuclear power in Ontario goes back a long way. In 1944, at a test reactor at Chalk River near Ottawa was the first nuclear reaction outside of the United States. And not long after that, in the 60s, Bruce Nuclear Generation Station was built and has since underpinned Ontario's energy sector, providing reliable, emissions-free, GHG-free power ever since. Today, nearly one-third of Ontario's electricity is generated by Bruce Power, which is today also the largest nuclear plant in the world. Across the province, on any given day, nuclear power provides as much as half of our electricity. Nuclear energy has been key to moving away from coal. And as a Speakers Club, a place that cares about the issues of the day, a place that sees politics up close and personal across this country, one fact that underscores the broad consensus around nuclear's benefits is that left or right, conservative or liberal, pro-environment or pro-business, the vast majority agree that a stable nuclear industry is important for Ontario. The sector represents more than $5 billion in annual business. It involves more than 800 companies and supports 60,000 jobs. It's no wonder the new Ford government today, like successive governments before it, has embraced the nuclear industry as a champion, as a key component of our energy and economic development plans. We also know that Bruce Power will continue to be a bedrock for our economy through its life extension project. That is why I am so pleased that Mike Rencheck is able to join us today. There is no one more qualified to tell us about the exciting developments that are taking place at Bruce Power and in the nuclear industry more broadly. Mike Rencheck is an engineer by training, but a leader by nature. He relies on more than 4 decades of experience in the industry to lead a team of more than 4,000 employees. So without further ado, someone who gets it, it's, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bruce Power's CEO, Mike Rencheck.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Wow, what an introduction. He gave my whole speech. Very good. Well, good afternoon. How many folks follow Wyerton Willie? Let's see some hands. So do we believe that the groundhog got it right this year? Look at this weather yesterday, and the sun's out, and March is ending like a lamb, so we're in a good way. I want to thank you for being here today. It's important for our industry that you all gather to hear about it. We're doing so many positive things, and I want to talk about a few of those things today. It's my pleasure to be here, and it's my pleasure to be here talking about the industry. It's an important role that engages thousands of Ontarians every day. And every day through their engagement, we secure a future of clean energy, clean air, and medical isotopes. And talking about these benefits well into the future for many, many years to come is a privilege. And I take that privilege very seriously. With the program we have before us today, our best days are ahead. They aren't behind us. Although we talk about a plant's first chain reaction in the 1940s and starting in the 60s, the future is quite bright. I'm excited today to update you on the business sector, and the public on the developments that our company is leading. We have some very exciting news to share with you today on a number of fronts, on a number of issues, on a number of important topics that Ontarians care about. However, before I do that, I want to share a video with you so that you can see some pictures of what the nuclear industry entails, what makes it up, what makes the people of Bruce Power tick, how do they view themselves and their roles. Bringing it a little closer with some pictures may help some of the words align today. So with that, I'd like to start off with a video. If you can turn on the video, please.
Ontario counts on Bruce Power to supply low-cost, clean energy to its residents and businesses. We provided 70% of the energy required to phase out coal, and today, we generate 30% of Ontario's electricity at 30% less than the average cost to produce residential power. Bruce Power has recently invested in a Made in Ontario solution to ensure that future generations can continue to count on us for the energy they need. Ranked as #1 on Renew Canada's top 100 biggest infrastructure projects for 2017, Bruce Power's multi-year life extension program will substantially boost Ontario's tax revenue and gross domestic product. This will inject more than $200 million annually to the province's manufacturing industry, with over 90% of the expenditures directed to Ontario's businesses. Moreover, the program will present new opportunities for high-quality careers, projecting the addition of at least 2,000 skilled trades workers each year. Nuclear energy is not only environmentally friendly and sustainable 24/7, but it is also one of the most cost-effective sources of electricity. With the Major Component Replacement Project, a critical part of the Life Extension Program, Bruce Power can maintain its commitment to power more for less by modernizing its reactor units. With the help of Bruce Power, Ontario is recognized as an international leader in nuclear innovation. Bruce Power is now consolidating the expertise of industry professionals for progressive applied research in fields such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, environmental health, and operational excellence through the establishment of the Nuclear Innovation Institute. Nuclear innovation in healthcare is saving countless lives around the globe with the use of medical isotopes harvested from the Bruce reactors. Cobalt-60 sterilizes medical devices, diagnoses and treats illness, promotes food safety, and fights deadly viruses. With over 40 million procedures requiring isotopes performed annually, Bruce Power is preparing to meet the rising demand.
In our field, we became very worried when we heard that we may not have as good of access of Cobalt-60 in the world because people weren't making it, and we depend on it in terms of some of the equipment that we have, in particular the Gamma Knife. And now that Bruce Power is taking this on, to breathe a sigh of relief, and so do our patients.
By refurbishing and upgrading reactor units, pioneering advanced technology, investing deeply in Ontario's economy, and fostering a proficient labor force to fill the expanding job openings, Bruce Power is creating a positive outlook for generations to come.
As you can see from the video, we have a lot of interesting innovations and developments underway. We're doing today the work of powering people's lives and laying the groundwork for a strong future. You know, that's a strong future built on a strong economy. Earlier today, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce released a report on the impact that our major component replacement has on Ontario and Canada, and that impact is significant. This is a key part of securing our role for the long term. The major component replacement is a portion of our life extension program, and our life extension program has our units running all the way out to 2064. How old will you be in 2064? Think about it. The program that we talked about has been underway since 2016, and it's been on time and on budget. So after 3 years and nearly $1 billion invested, we are doing the work that we set out to do, effectively, cost-effectively, and delivering the results that we need to be able to add decades of life to the 6 reactors at Bruce Power. Again, all the way to 2064 and beyond. Can you see that far? Can you see that far into the future and what it might entail? And I'm pleased to report that this report went further into major component replacement part of the program, which is central to the life extension. And the major component replacement will start in 2020. It starts in 2020 and it runs all the way out through the early 2030s. We are set up for success with engineering nearing completion, having purchased all of the parts, with many of the parts being delivered this year. We also have our construction partners ramping up and mobilizing to get ready to do the construction work. And together, these are all key factors in enabling success. We are also working very closely and sharing the lessons learned with our partners at Ontario Power Generation at their Darlington refurbishment. And I am very proud of our peers, and I'm very proud to report that that refurbishment is going very well. Let's give a round of applause to the OPG people. The Chamber of Commerce concluded that our MCR program, which runs through the 2030s, increases Ontario's domestic product by 4.8 to 7.1 billion annually. That's billion with a B. And Canada's GDP by 5.2 to 7.8 billion. Up to $2 billion in tax revenues will be realized by federal, provincial, and municipal governments, enabling them to provide public services to the citizens of Ontario and Canada. Those are big numbers, staggering numbers. I encourage you to get the Chamber's report and read it. Share it amongst your companies, and if you would, post it out on social media. It's something that's not that well known, but nonetheless, it will carry the day for many years into the future. You see, the Ontario Chamber is the authority on economic issues in the province, and their supporting for us as a low-cost, clean energy provider is important. Their support for us as an economic driver of the province is important, and we're honored to be able to have this type of support from the Chamber. Let's give Ontario Chamber a round of applause. One of the most important things we do in nuclear, though, is often not discussed. That's our role in the fight against cancer and disease. How many folks knew that nuclear energy was important to the medical communities? Let's see a show of hands. A few. I'm pleased to announce today that Bruce Power has completed our first harvest of medical-grade cobalt over the weekend. This is one aspect of our business and our industry, that we've made medical isotopes for years, but we've been doing it in a very quiet manner. Canada has been and will remain a world leader in isotope production and supply. And we'll continue to do this for decades to come, thanks to the innovations that we're implementing at Bruce Power. We're realizing an historic advancement that marks our entry into medical isotopes that directly fight cancer. The medical-grade cobalt will power the Gamma Knife, a technological advancement in brain cancer treatment that's far less invasive for patients, and it has achieved very good results. And the Gamma Knife technology is another technology innovated right here in Ontario in London Hospital, and now advanced throughout the world. You see, about 70,000 patients a year undergo treatment through the Gamma Knife. Bruce Power began producing the medical-grade isotopes starting in 2016 because of a shortage in the marketplace due to impending 2018 closure of the National Research Universal Reactor at Chalk River. When the NRU closed, the world's medical community was incredibly worried that these isotope supplies would simply run out and there would be no alternatives available that would be as affordable as what we could make it. Without Bruce Power's involvement, there would be a shortage of the isotope, medical-grade cobalt-60, putting lives in danger. And by starting this process in 2016, our innovations have now enabled the production when that supply is needed most, right now and today. Medical-grade cobalt-60 will be in addition to the production of cobalt-60 that we've made for decades. The cobalt-60 that we make helps sterilize 40% of the world's single-use medical devices, such as gloves, syringes, masks, and gowns. How many folks have ever been to the dentist or a surgery? Chances are that an isotope from Bruce Power sterilized the equipment that were used in those procedures. And it comes from right here in Ontario. You know, I often ask, what does a 40% mean? And our good friends at Nordion have done some calculations, and they say what it translates to is about 100 billion syringes, or about 10 billion pairs of surgical gloves, to put that in context. It's quite an impact we have. With our scale, our isotopes are affordable, and we can protect people around the world by fighting disease and treating cancer. But sometimes we talk about these things in the abstract, but we should never lose sight of the fact that we are improving people's lives. I want to share a story with you. It makes it real and it makes it personal. Can you turn on the video, please?
Started to notice that I was losing my hearing a little bit in my right ear, and I had been to my family doctor, and he kept saying that it was likely just fluid in my inner ear and it would, just dissolve on its own, go away on its own, and just to be patient. I started to have vertigo, off balance, dizziness, stuff like that. The doctor had recommended that we do an MRI. Prior to this, of course, I had been looking on Google and everything else and kept coming up with an acoustic neuroma, which is a rare brain tumor, and all the symptoms had sort of been leading to that, but you're thinking, okay, it's rare, what are the chances? When you hear brain tumor, you think something that's really, really, really serious. To be honest, the thought of surgery scared me, to have my head cut open and not knowing what the outcome would be.
The options are very simple: observation, surgery, or gamma knife radiosurgery. I will tell her that yes, this is one that Surgery can be done, but there are risks to the surgery. As a surgeon, I feel that the gamma knife is an option.
It's an arrangement of small sources of radiation called cobalt-60. And because these sources are small and directing pinpoint beams at a target or a location in the brain, we can deliver very precise radiation delivery in the brain with this unit. In our field, we became very worried when we heard that we may not have as good of access of cobalt-60 in the world because people weren't making it, and we depend on it in terms of some of the equipment that we have, in particular the gamma knife. And now that Bruce Power's taken this on, it breathed a sigh of relief, and so do our patients.
This is basically a treatment that uses radiation cobalt-60 supplied by the nuclear industry. So from that perspective, we are grateful to them for supplying these.
Sometimes seeing is more important than hearing. And I want to thank Tracy for coming here today. She's here with us, and I would ask her to come up and say a few words on the treatments. So, Tracy?
It was nice to see my backyard looking so green and colorful, and hope to see that again soon. There's not much more that I can say that the video didn't already say, but I'm so grateful that I was able to receive this treatment, and to Bruce Power for making that happen and for producing these medical isotopes. To Dr. Fred Gentili and his team at the Gamma Knife Center at Toronto Western, and also to the Brain Tumor Foundation. My treatment was last year, and within weeks I was able to carry on and live a successful life. I was back exercising, took a much needed cycling trip in Prince Edward County, and back to work. So thank you so much.
Tracy, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And also the great work, I want to recognize the great work that the Brain Tumor Foundation also does. We look forward to continuing our work with you and the Brain Tumor Foundation for many years in the future, and making sure that treatments are available and affordable for the citizens of Ontario and the citizens of Canada. But before I leave that topic on isotopes, I just have to say one thing. They come with a great pair of socks. So if you want to help support Cobalt-60 use and the Brain Tumor Foundations, you can see some of our folks here, and they'll gladly put you in touch with the Brain Tumor Foundation for a donation, and then we can get you a pair of Cobalt-60 socks. They're all the latest fashion rage. Trust me. Trust me. We believe that our medical-grade Cobalt-60 can be used to fight breast cancer as well. And we're working very diligently through an organization that we created to partner with different medical communities in bringing technologies from North America to here in Canada and advancing them. We think, as we speak, we think we can do these things in the coming years. And it's not just something that's off in the distant future. Right? We can make these things a reality by working together today. We can make medical treatments more affordable and more accessible for many people. We're bringing the strength of Canadian innovation to this, and we're not just going to stop at Cobalt-60. As we look at different isotopes throughout the world, there's one thing assured, that there's a growing need for the treatment, and more access will be needed. And with the scale that Bruce Power offers and our ability to produce the isotopes, we can make them in a manner where it's not only plentiful but affordable. Simply put, nuclear power has been and will continue to quietly protect and advance human health. We save lives every day. Aside from these two recent developments, nuclear power has many day-to-day qualities that are also not very well known to the public. For example, Bruce Power generates 30% of the energy for Ontario at 30% less than the average cost to generate. That's 4 times the power produced by Niagara Falls, or the equivalent of powering about 5 million homes. We are a low-cost generator. So despite what the Clean Air Alliance, so they call themselves, likes to say, you can just ask the Ontario Energy Board, the Financial Accountability Office, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. The list goes on, and the numbers speak for themselves. We are a low-cost producer, and we will be for many decades to come. Finally, I want to end on a note that's very close to home for us in Bruce County, and that's our regional rural economy in Bruce, Grey, and Huron counties. One of the first things I did as CEO of Bruce Power was to partner with Bruce County, Grey, and Huron, and all of our communities to launch an economic development initiative. Since then, approximately 50 of our suppliers have moved into the area, and we've created upwards of 300 small businesses in the 3 counties in the last 2 years. That's the equivalent of about $100 million in building permits in the area and around 10,000 housing units. This recognizes that to be successful, we must connect the nuclear ecosystem in Ontario with a strong local presence. Supporting companies have opened satellite offices, and many of them are here today, and I want to personally thank you for all of that, creating hundreds of jobs, increasing local tax base, and providing welcome investment into the non-nuclear portions of our communities. This is a made-in-Canada solution, and it's a made-in-Ontario solution. And taken together, the nuclear industry's impact economically is staggering. Yet very few people realize that a strong nuclear sector means high-quality jobs throughout the province, improved quality of life for Ontarians, and it lasts for decades. Can you see all the way to 2064? By and large, the nuclear industry supports about 60,000 jobs. Just through the refurbishment, we'll create 22,000 direct and indirect jobs. And those will be sustained year in and year out for as long as the major component replacement program is underway. In closing, nuclear energy is part of our past, it's part of our present, and it'll be part of our future, providing clean, reliable, affordable electricity, enabling clean air energy, and producing medical isotopes that not only fight disease, but they save people's lives. We power your lives, and simply put, we power more for less. I want to thank you for coming today, and I look forward to participating in the fireside chat. So, Michael, thank you very much.
Wonderful. So I want to thank Mike and I want to thank Tracy. We think about nuclear power so much and we think of it in terms of generation, but to understand a little bit more about the medical isotope part and the great work the industry doing is great. So without further ado, we brought up Andrew Willis from the Globe and Mail, who's going to lead a little fireside chat. So maybe I'll just turn it over to you now, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And Mike, that was a wonderful speech. And Tracy, thank you very much for bringing home the work that Bruce Power does. That was very, very touching. Mike, I have to tell you, actually, I have firsthand experience with Bruce Power, as I imagine some of you in this room do. My family owns a cottage on the shores of Lake Huron, not that far south of your facilities. And if any of you ever make that drive to Lake Huron, either going northwest out of Toronto or going due west out of Toronto, I would suggest you would see both the present, which is the Bruce facility, but also the future of Ontario Power, because that whole drive is through windmills. There are massive wind farms along Lake Huron, right around Bruce Power. So what I thought I'd do to start out is just to get you to talk a little bit, Mike, about the supply mix in Ontario and how Bruce Power and nuclear energy would compete and fit in a future which also features renewable technology and other smaller scale technologies.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that for a little bit from a perspective of energy affordability. When we look at power, Bruce Power generates about 30% of the energy at 30% less than the average residential cost. When you look at the Ontario Energy Board numbers, solar is at about 51 cents kilowatt hour, gas is at about 20 cents, wind is at about 16 cents kilowatt hour, and Bruce Power, we're about 7 cents, with hydroelectric at about 6 cents. So effectively, we are the low-cost producer in the province. Now, when you look at your electric bill, you'll say, what makes up the electric bill? How many people say that? When you think about it, we supply totally about 30 to 40% of the energy. We're about 10% of the electric bill cost. When you look at some of the renewables like wind and solar, they're supplying less than 10% of the energy, but they're making up roughly 40% of the cost of that electric bill. So as we look at it, Andrew, we think not only in the near term do we have our place of anchoring low-cost power for the province, for all the citizens, we see that anchor staying stable and predictable for the long term. And in our plants, we've done a number of innovations over the years. So it's more than just electricity. We talked about the isotopes, but we are also able to load follow with our plants. In other words, we can swing the output around our plants roughly 2,000 to 2,600 megawatts in a very short period to accommodate different types of technologies that are entering the grid. You see, we're one of the only nuclear plants in North America that can do that, and I know there are many in Europe that are underway, but we see our fit and our practice long term. We see the future with a very solid, reliable, affordable baseload energy that's able to move and adapt and innovate and become more than just an electric supply. There aren't very many other technologies, if any, that can generate power and medical isotopes at the same time. Right? It's kind of like chewing and walking gum, right? Or walking and chewing gum, I should say, backwards. But quite frankly, we see the future that way. We see the future as not just an energy product, but a product that really will enable the lives of citizens far and wide.
And obviously, in Ontario, the price of electricity has been a hot-button political issue, but you've also got a lot, and that's more a residential thing, you've also got a lot of industrial companies in this province that not only look at price, but also at the reliability of the system. Do you want to just talk for a moment about other facets, like what are you hearing from industrial customers as they think about the electrical supply system and the power situation in Ontario?
Yeah, they wish they were Bruce Power. They could come directly to Bruce Power, right? At 6.6 cents, it looks really bright for them as an industrial customer. But when you see the ability to compete, right? I think when you get into the electric system, I think energy and being plentiful and reliable makes a difference in terms of where companies are choosing to come. And I know as we look at our power coming out of Bruce, it's 24/7, 365. In other words, the units aren't depending on when the sun shines or when the wind blows. Right? It simply is a matter of clean energy, online, full-time, all the time. And it's something that can be predictable, and it's something that can be patterned and built into a business plan.
I'm going to get you to talk for a minute about the Cobalt 60 initiative, because I know for me, and I think for a lot of people in this room, the role that Bruce Power plays in medical isotopes is probably relatively new. So can you talk for a moment, are these products unique to Bruce Power, and are there other isotopes, other business lines in medical isotopes that you're going to be looking at getting into?
Yeah, it's very, very much. It's really not new. We've been making Cobalt 60, the low specific activity Cobalt 60, with our friends at OPG for many years. Canada, it's little known, but Canada has an 80% market share through a company called Nordion, and I saw Richard here this morning, that's based out of Ottawa. And we've been able to have this position in the world marketplace for decades. What caused the shortage was the shutdown of the NRU reactor due to just end of life, right? So we've made some innovations and have been able to take cobalt and actually upgrade it to a medical grade cobalt. So we still make the low specific activity supply, and now we're making the high specific activity supply. So that is a new venture for us. And as we look at our source with the innovation, we think we can put delivery systems into place that make different isotopes for many years to come. I know our friends at OPG are working on isotopes that are different than cobalt, and we're in the process now of looking at different isotopes as well. And these can be businesses that are launched locally and set up right here in Ontario.
One of the other things that you talked about, Mike, was the opportunity to put a lot of people to work on the refurbishment of your systems and also just on running Bruce Power. And I happen to have a daughter who's in science, technology, engineering, math, the STEM cells in university, so I'm hoping she's working for you in a couple of years' time. But can you just talk a little bit about skilled trades and about engineering graduates? And if you could even reflect a little bit on what you're seeing the universities graduate right now in Canada and in the States, and what you're going to need over time, and how your need for talent jibes with what the universities are producing?
Yeah, sure. That's a multifaceted question, but let's start with the trades, right? University isn't for everyone. So oftentimes, when you go through high school, you really don't know what you want to do as an adolescent, and the schools tend to try to channel the kids off to university. But you know, the trades are a wonderful career, and we see that growing here in Ontario for many decades to come. With our construction program underway, you know, we'll talk about a construction period that starts in 2020 and goes through the early mid-2030s. But then it doesn't stop there. It keeps going all the way out through 2045 with the renewal and life extension of the units. So if you're a 20-year-old today starting in the industry, you'll be nearly my age by the time you're done with the Bruce site. That's a career. That's not a job. That's a career. And the opportunities are abound. You know, we're doing a lot of work with local colleges and looking to bring high schoolers into the trades program. We've been working very heavily with the Building Trades Union, the Power Workers Union, and also the society from the aspect of engineering. Now, we have a lot of outreach going on in the engineering areas, especially with a lot of the local universities here in Ontario. I would say we probably hire anywhere from 300 to 400 technical engineers a year just in our company. And as I look out through the audience and I see all of our suppliers, you see we do business with about 200 suppliers. And then each of them do business with anywhere from 10 to 100 other sub-suppliers. So that net is quite broad in terms of number of jobs. When we look at it incrementally from a study perspective, we believe we're creating somewhere around 22,000 new direct and indirect jobs each year, about 60,000 people in the industry. So there's quite an opportunity to be employed in the nuclear industry in the near term, but also for the long term.
Thanks, and I will encourage my daughter.
Yes.
One of the other things, you mentioned the Power Workers Union. For those of you who don't know the structure of Bruce Power's ownership, it's quite unique. You've got the OMERS pension plan as a shareholder, TransCanada, the big Alberta utility, but you've also got the Power Workers Union and the professional engineers are significant equity holders in your company. So at the risk of getting you to talk about your bosses, can you just reflect for a moment on what it means to have employee ownership to the degree you have, where there's significant stakeholders in your company?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you know, a number of them are in the audience here today too. So we love the Power Workers Union and we love the society, right? They're the people that power our organization. And having them as owners make a real difference, right? It aligns our objectives and our priorities for the most part on how we proceed forward with business. And I think it's just a structure too of our public-private partnership where, you know, if we were a public entity, sometimes some things become overburdened and a little inefficient, where other times in the pure private sector, sometimes the priorities get skewed in a direction that's a little different. but having our foot in both worlds with that partnership, it creates a synergy around, we lock in on a long-term goal, we're able to have a longer-term focus, not only for the outcomes of our owners, but for our employees, for the communities, and for the province. So it's a really good fit, and it's great to have them as partners.
If I can go big picture on you for a moment, the big debate of our times, I think, is going to be how we as leaders and how we as a generation deal with climate change. And obviously, the nuclear industry, although you mentioned in your remarks that occasionally there's some noise around it, the nuclear industry is now very much a part of the conversation, particularly in the United States, on how we combat climate change. So can you just develop for a moment what role you think Bruce Power and the nuclear industry in general can play in dealing with climate change?
Yeah, sure. You know, first of all, with a nuclear power plant, you have zero emissions effectively. They're so small, they're unmeasurable. In Ontario, this is another one of these little known facts. Ontario is the world leader in CO2 emissions from the electric sector. How many folks knew that? Right? A few. We are the world leader. Now, if someone said Germany or California, you'd probably go, oh, that makes sense. Would it surprise you that Ontario is about 3 to 4 times less than California in terms of carbon intensity in the electric sector? And then orders of magnitude less than Germany. And what powers that, right? Here in Ontario, 60% of the power comes from nuclear. About 25% comes from hydro, and you get about 10% from other clean sources like wind and solar. So we are a very clean province with a very clean electric sector. As we look forward to growing demands for energy, like how many folks have these little devices that called cell phones, right? Right, how many folks are looking at cars that operate either in a hybrid mode with gasoline and batteries? How many of you have industrial plants that you're shifting from thermal cycles to electrification because it's more efficient, more effective, and cheaper to operate? So when I look at the need for a clean energy future that's affordable and reliable, I think you'll see nuclear taking part of that conversation more broadly here in Canada and throughout the world. And I think its position as a clean energy source can't be ignored as we look and think through climate change. It's too important.
Thanks. So the way this is structured is this is your meeting as much as it's my meeting. I don't get to ask all the questions. We do have, I believe, two microphones in the crowd right now. So if any of you would like to pose a question to Mike or make an observation, obviously you'd be welcome to do so. Please reach out. Maybe if you're thinking about that, I'll throw one more question your way, Mike, because I know we are reaching our time limit on our lunch. As I mentioned a moment ago, you've got a private sector ownership structure with the 4 partners that make up your shareholders. There are 2 large facilities in Ontario, Darlington and Pickering, which are owned by OPG, so effectively they're government controlled. I'm going to guess from your chair, you like your ownership structure. Can you talk just generally about the difference between a private company working in the nuclear sector versus government ownership, and any suggestions you might have on what this government could do with Darlington and Pickering?
Yeah, first, let's talk about OPG. They're great partners. You know, we share so many things with Ontario Power Generation. Actually, Ontario Power Generation owns our site, and we lease it from them. We share innovations and technologies, not just around nuclear operation, but also through some of our business processes. We actually have a meeting where we hold monthly, kind of a joint staff meeting of Ken Hartwick's direct reports and my direct reports. And we go through different areas of the business to understand best practices and lessons learned and how we can make the industry more efficient. Not only more efficient, though, it's also a product of being able to introduce new technologies and innovations. You know, we have people that are working on artificial intelligence, isotopes, 3D printing, robotics, all the things that you would look at and think, wow, this is pretty advanced and sophisticated. And the nice part about it is we're doing it right here in Ontario. We have different sub-suppliers and different companies that are working with us to create these next generations of technologies that we're putting into our plants, but then also we're creating an external export market for them such that the companies can sell these technologies elsewhere and abroad. So when I look at that partnership, I think it's a good fit with us. OPG has the site, they maintain the site, and we have a good working relationship, and we look for that to last for many years to come.
Thanks very much. Now, I've thrown it open to the floor. Are there any questions that anybody would like to pose to Mike?
Thank you. Is this on? So as you said, I think most people in Ontario, certainly most people in this room, would agree that nuclear power is part of the solution when it comes to greenhouse gases. The way I look at the country is Eastern Canada either already has a solution to GHG-free power, but Western Canada needs a solution. But the perception in Western Canada is different. They're not necessarily favorable to nuclear power. I'm sure you've seen that. If you could just speak to that, is that an opportunity for Bruce Power or the nuclear sector in general?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. You know, I've seen that a lot in my career where people, no matter what the technology is, they're afraid of what they don't know about. And folks tend to plug the negative in when there isn't a narrative or enough information available. But what we find is, when you sit down and talk to folks about the benefits and the realities, and when you really take them to a facility to look at one, their minds often change. It's a subtle shift, and the importance when you look at how we're combating climate change, if we have any hope of dealing with it, we're going to have to get past the stigmas of the past. When I look generationally at our workforce, we have about 35 to almost 40% of our workforce under the age of 35. And that generation, when they look at nuclear power, they've come into the industry because many of them consider themselves environmentalists. And I think you'll see more and more of that taking hold and taking root as time goes on. I think the benefits far outweigh the issues, and I think if you look at any technology, there is no one single answer, and the technologies all often have their downsides. But I think when you look at nuclear power, the upside is far more up than down, and I think that paints a bright future, and someday we'll look at being out west with maybe small modular reactors and a fleet of them that can be manufactured right here in Ontario, but also in other places throughout Canada, like our good friends at NB Power at New Brunswick, looking to create a small modular reactor ecosystem there. So I think time heals, and with what we need in terms of clean energy, if we're going to continue to have prosperity, we're going to need nuclear power and all other sources of clean energy. I see a bright future.
Thanks. Any other questions from the floor? If not, I think I will wrap up this chat. Thank you very, very much, Mike. And
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you all very much.
And I'm pleased to welcome Joseph Mancinelli from LiUNA up to thank our speaker.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Empire Club, ladies and gentlemen, Michael. I've had the pleasure of hearing Michael speak in the past. And in fact, just a few short months ago, he attended LiUNA's conference in Florida, where a very small group of 1,200 people got a chance to listen to Michael. Very interesting speaker and a very progressive leader. One that not only leads the largest nuclear facility in the world, but so many progressive things that are being done by Bruce Power under his leadership. Very interesting here today to hear about all of the work that's going to be done over the several years at Bruce Power that affects 22,000 workers there. I represent 120,000 workers, and we're looking forward to working very closely with Bruce Power on that multi-year initiative. But most importantly, the isotopes and the work that's being done that affects so many lives and so many people. And I know that looking at this room and knowing the statistics, I would guarantee that every family has been affected in one way or another by cancer and the very important effects of using these isotopes and cobalt may change the lives of so many people. So Michael, thank you so much for being with us here today. We really appreciate your comments. We appreciate your presentation, and keep up the great work, and thanks for keeping the lights on. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Thank you very much. We ask you to look ahead to other events that are coming up. For those who have tickets already, because these two are sold out, we have the Honorable Vic Fideli joining the Empire Club on the 28th, and we have Dan Snow in conversation with Peter Mansbridge on April 23rd. There'll be other events coming out. Please look up on our website. So stay tuned for other events. Thank you for joining us today. The meeting is adjourned.